What's going on, guys? It's Killer. Welcome back to the channel. Now, in today's video, I am going to be covering why I have executed a 2x swing long on Bitcoin. Now, this post went quite viral on X, and there was a lot of hate towards it, mainly because of my invalidation, what I'm expecting, and so forth. So, in today's video, I'm going to be covering all of that, my confluences, what I'm looking at, and the reason why I precisely decided to long right now. So, first and foremost, to brush up on the RR here, we're looking at a 3-to-1 risk reward. Later in the video, I'll get to why I believe we are going to 160k and why I'm so confident in that thesis next cycle, but I do want to quickly cover why my invalidation is around this level. So my invalidation sits at 31,000, right? And the reason why I have my invalidation there is because I'm 2x long. And if you measure this move from here to here, this is approximately around a 50% drop. So to be 100% precise, the liquidation or invalidation on this position is around that 31 to 32k region. And basically what I'm betting on here is that Bitcoin is not going to drop another 50%. Right, I am betting on the fact that the bottom is close and we are never going to get down to this region. So what have I done? Well, I've allocated a portion of my assets into this 2x long. Yes, if my invalidation is hit, I will lose a couple 100k. It's not going to be pleasant, right? But I have not allocated my entire assets into this particular leverage long. I have bought 75% of my holdings in spot, and I'm risking a couple 100k on this particular trade. So even if this trade was to get liquidated, I will still be holding 75% of my Bitcoin in spot, which I anticipate to hold without selling at all. So even if I somehow manage to get stopped out on this, there's a very good chance that obviously my spot holdings will recoup the loss because it's 3 times the size and obviously make me a profit once we eventually break a new all-time high. So the reason why my invalidation is here is because I don't see Bitcoin dropping 50% from here. Could we see 20%, 30%? Sure, we could definitely see that happen, but I do not think we are going to see another 50% drop on Bitcoin from where we are currently speaking, given that the market historically bottoms around Q4. Right now, we are in June. So we have July, August, September. We have about 2.5 months left until we have reached that time span of where Bitcoin macro bottoms. And I do not think we are going to see a major 50% capitulation candle for Bitcoin. I think majority of the correction has happened, and we might see another 10-20% deviation below this wick. No, I just don't simply see this 32k region happening. Now, I am taking this trade because I'm on low leverage, right? I've calculated the funding fees and I've calculated how much I would pay over an annualized 1.5 to 2 year hold, and it would be approximately 9 to 20% on the high end if I hold this position for 1.5 to 2 years, which is nothing compared to obviously the return which I would make. Now you're probably wondering, well, why don't you just buy spot and pay no fees? And that's a good point. However, being in a long position from the lows, it allows me to take hedge shorts when I think the cycle's topping or where we're at key areas of resistance, and I can take delta neutral short positions against my swing long. For instance, let's say Bitcoin does deviate below this low here and starts pushing lower and then pushes all the way back up to here, and we start testing this resistance and showing signs of exhaustion. Because I'm already in a swing long from below, I can delta neutral hedge, take a swing short position which cancels out the long, and I can capture that retest and then close the short and then leave the long holding. Obviously, this is only a small high here. We're mainly looking at, let's say, the 100k high where we'd reject possibly on first try, similar to where we rejected the first all-time high and dropped 30% in the previous cycle, right? So the reason why I'm in a swing long and I do have 75% of my holdings in spot instead of just buying here, instead of being 100% allocated to spot, is because I can delta neutral hedge when I believe the market's overheated against my swing long position. So that's the reason why I've entered into this swing long. Now, for those who were talking about my risk reward, and obviously, oh, a 50% drop is massive. Yes, it is a big drop. But when you're on 2x leverage and you've allocated only a portion of your assets to this position, I can hold this position with no doubts. I'm not going to need to pull any money out of it. I'm not going to need to do anything. I can hold this position on a sub account, completely forget about it, and just come back to it in the next 1.5 to 2 years, right? And if we look at things from a risk reward perspective, we are looking at a 3-to-1. And if we look at the drawdown, we have a 50% drop for the potential return of a 150% move towards the upside. So the risk reward is already significantly in my favor here, just based on this 2x swing long. Going over to one of the subtle confluences which I'm observing as well. Every single cycle, Bitcoin has had a sweep of the previous capitulation wick low, and the capitulation wick low is the last meaningful drop before the bottom is formed. If we start looking in 2015, we had the capitulation wick, we ranged, we had another capitulation wick sweeping the low, and that was the bottom. We saw the same thing here, capitulation low, next candle opens, sweeps the lows, and reverses back upwards. We saw the same thing in 2022 as well, where we formed this capitulation low from 31k all the way down to 17k. We ranged, swept the lows, and pushed towards the upside. And if we start zooming in and seeing what Bitcoin is doing now in comparison to previous cycles, Bitcoin is dropping, it had its retest, it swept the wick low. So based on this pattern alone here, regardless of the time-based analysis, as I've said, we usually bottom in Q4 every single cycle, we are already sweeping that wick low before that Q4 period. So it leads me to believe, are we going to trust the price action or the timing? Now, from my experience, the timing is more important. But at some points, we are going to see timings shift. For instance, first shift, we created an all-time high pre-halving. Never done before. We topped October 6. Never done before. 1.5 months sooner than every single cycle. So eventually the timing is going to shift. We're going to top sooner, we're going to bottom sooner, which leads me to believe that this could actually be the last capitulation low before we start pushing upwards. Now, if I'm wrong, well, then we could see some extended moves towards the downside into this August-October period where Bitcoin is likely to bottom based on just the timing alone, which would be like 20-30% drop. I do not see a 50% drop, though, to my invalidation around this price region. So that is what I'm observing at the moment based on a structural perspective of obviously what has happened in every other cycle. Every time we've swept the wick low, it has resulted in an impulse on the higher time frame. So this is definitely the area to observe. If we break the low, we'll just have chop below this area before obviously pushing upwards. Like I've said, it's very reasonable to expect that this could happen, right? I might be wrong, I might be early, that doesn't matter. I'm still going to be in my long, I'm still going to be in my spot, and this is my higher time frame thesis, right? Now, going over to this chart here, in realistic terms, where do I expect Bitcoin to bottom based on the mathematics and previous cycle returns? Well, we could see another 20% drop, right? When I created this chart, Bitcoin was at 60.9k. Now, that 20% drop puts us at 48k, sweeping around this wick low. Now, we could see 23, 24% drop, 25% drop around this region. It might not be 20%, which would extend this slightly to around this price region here. Now, we start looking at the risk reward just from this drop to this high here. Like I've said in my previous video as well, I am not prepared to miss out on this impulse because I'm so fixated on this move towards the downside, right? Because eventually what happens is you keep lowering your prices, lowering your targets, and then eventually you are underexposed, you get front run, and then out of disbelief, when the price starts moving upwards, you start shorting, trying to aim for that low just out of spite. So, like I've said, when you view things from a mathematical standpoint and the risk reward standpoint, we're looking at maybe a 25% drop until we have fully macro bottomed at the worst case scenario, right? And if we start looking at the return of Bitcoin, we're looking at 110% just to get to the new high. We're not even looking at the 150, 160 region yet. So we can see that based on the math, the returns are far greater in our favor for bulls. Now, if we start looking at this chart and looking at every single previous bear market retrace, we can see a diminishing factor in terms of how big the drops are each cycle. We had the cycle here where we had 2011 and we dropped through 2012, 93.3%. We had 87% the following, 84.5, 77.8, and we can see that each cycle the drops are getting shallower. Now, if I mark from the current high all the way to that 77.8% as the previous wick low and the previous retrace we saw back in 2021, that would put Bitcoin at 28k. Now, we can already see that the percentages are getting shallower. So what do I expect is going to happen for Bitcoin? Well, I expect this percentage isn't going to go down to 77.8. I expect it to do 70, 69, 68, around this region. And if we mark out where that would put us, that would put Bitcoin at around that 37 on the low end. If we do 70% right, if we do a 70% drop this cycle, that would put us at 37. And obviously, if we do a 68% drop, that would put us at that 40k region. Now, if we go back over to my long position, you can see that that would get very close to my invalidation if we happen to get to that 40k region, right? It would get very close to my invalidation. So there is a possibility that worst case scenario, we do see something like this. If this does happen and it does get close to my invalidation, I'm still going to be holding the position, right? I've been through worse. I held that swing short position around here. Of course, I closed 50% to de-risk. However, if we get to this low and we happen to have that retrace, I wouldn't expect it to go below 31k because that wouldn't match all of the other previous cycles where we've seen a significantly smaller drop. So it's important to take into consideration here that I could be early on this swing long. If I am, like I've said, I am 75% exposed in spot. I'm only risking 25% of my crypto holdings in this long position. Will I add if it gets closer to my invalidation? I'm not sure. However, currently speaking, I do not believe we're going to see another 50% drop from where the price is at the moment. Could we see a 25% drop? Sure. I just do not see another 50% drop. Now, going over and looking at the breakouts and the percentages of increases after we break the previous all-time high, we can also see how the returns are getting shallower every single cycle. We're not pumping as high and as big a percentage as before. We had 1,469, 250, a massive drop, 84. So if we start measuring 20% above the previous all-time high, that puts Bitcoin at 150k. If we do another 20%, that puts Bitcoin at 180k. So if Bitcoin only does half of the return it done in the previous cycle, that would still put Bitcoin around that 160 to 180k region, which is why this is going to be my primary target for this long position. I'm simply aiming for this particular movement towards the upside, right? So this is why I am looking at that 160 to 180 region based on the diminishing factors of how every time we break a new all-time high, the price is only giving a smaller return. Now, eventually, as Bitcoin matures as an asset, this is going to be the case. We're going to see shallower bull market, we're going to see shallower bear markets, and less parabolic bull runs, which is why it's important to understand that we might not go down 77%. Like I've said, if we do the same thing here, where we saw a 7% drop, that would put Bitcoin at a 70% drop this cycle, putting us at 37k, very close to my swing long stop loss, but it would put us at 37k, a smaller drop than the previous cycle. We might do 65%, we might do 60%. Basically, timing the exact Pico bottom is quite difficult, and I am not prepared to miss out on the entire upside, like I've said, for the minimal downside available. So if I happen to get stopped out of my swing long, I will reevaluate, probably buy even more spot around this price region, and then once I see the structure shift, then I will go long again. So if we do start breaking towards the downside and we do take my invalidation, I would take another swing long the moment we reclaim the range and start showing bullish structure, something like this, where we are forming higher highs and higher lows. I will just execute into a similar low leverage swing long position, similar size to this one, and then try to catch the move towards the upside if my first swing long entry is invalidated. Like I've said, yes, I'm swing long, but I'm not over risking and I'm not putting all of my assets in one position. I'm risking a couple 100k on this position, but I'm always ready to deploy more the lower we go. So this is my overall thoughts, my overall plans, what I'm expecting. So moving on to our next subtle confluence here, we are in extreme fear. And it has always been a good time to buy on the higher time frame when we are in extreme fear. So another little subtle confluence to pretty much suggest where we are in the cycle. We are not in euphoria. We are not around this orange and yellow region where we are in the median. We are in extreme fear, which has always been a strong signal to buy. We also have the Bitcoin RSI index, where we obviously see we are in this prolonged red period. Last cycle done 43, the previous cycle 41.92, 38.3, and we are at 40.5. So again, if we compare to every other cycle, the highs are getting shallower, which means the drops could get shallower as well. Just another little metric I like to observe to understand the current market's positioning at the moment. Again, if we start looking at the days since the last breakout, we can obviously see that once Bitcoin breaks its new high and starts pushing towards the upside, we can see just about where we are positioned in the cycle, right? And if we start looking through the days, we are on day 750. And if we start looking at where every other cycle is compared around this period, this is where that macro bottom is formed for Bitcoin before obviously going on its bear market rally, or where the bull market begins, in other words. So another little metric I like to observe, where we see the days since the price broke out into the top, into the bottom formation. So this is something I'm observing as well. We can see Bitcoin has had that final correction, or majority of that correction, and now we are in this period where it's time to buy. Obviously, this is my opinion and my opinion alone. Lastly, we can see that miners are capitulating. We can see that we are in this extended red region where it's always been a good time to buy when miners are capitulating. So another little small metric I am observing as well. But overall, these are my thoughts on the market at the moment and what I am observing. Hopefully this video was informative, and I will catch you guys later.